Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining Dragon Trail Interactive for the April edition of our monthly webinar series. The topic of today's webinar is what hotels can do right now to respond to and cope with the COVID-19 pandemic that has brought travel to a standstill all around the world. I'll be sharing many examples today from China and globally, and I do understand that the situation is different for every hotel, depending on if you're part of a big group or a smaller group or an independent property, as well as your location and facilities. But my hope is that there is some practical advice and ideas for everyone to take something away from today's session. We'll start with the webinar with a quick overview on what short-term effects of the coronavirus have been on hotels in China as well as globally. Then we'll look at digital communication strategies that you can use during this time. With bookings severely reduced, we'll also share some ideas for generating revenue even during the crisis. The tourism industry, especially hotels, has an opportunity to give back and help in the fight against coronavirus rather than just be a victim of this outbreak. And I'll share some global examples of how to do that. Finally, we'll look ahead to where recovery is likely to come first to help you to prepare a targeted strategy for that time. At the end of the webinar, I can take your questions, which you can ask at any point by using the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel. Please do use the Q&A button as opposed to asking questions in the chat. And that's because if you use the Q&A button, it's very easy for me to see and answer all of the questions afterwards, whereas they tend to get lost in the chat. We will be sharing the slides from today's presentation with all attendees via email, as well as a link to a recording of the session, and you should expect to receive that tomorrow. For those who don't know me from past webinars, my name is Sienna Perulis-Cook, and I'm Dragon Trail's Associate Director of Communications, based in our London office. My work for Dragon Trail is largely educational, putting together market intelligence reports, weekly articles and reports for our website, and running our monthly webinar series. I'm also the co-author of the 2019 book, China, the Future of Travel, which is an essential primer on Chinese outbound tourism and tourism marketing, and is available for free from chinafutureoftravel.com. In the past month, I've been looking at what international hotel brands have been doing in China since the coronavirus crisis began, to see what hotels around the world can learn from the Chinese experience. I've also recently been speaking directly with some smaller international hotel groups about how they're handling the crisis. Dragon Trail Interactive is a digital marketing and solutions agency that's focused on outbound tourism from China, and this includes both consumer and trade marketing. We've been around for more than a decade and have 3 offices in China, in Beijing, Shanghai, and Xi'an, as well as international offices in London and in Lexington, Kentucky in the US. The Chinese market is our specialty, but this webinar will address the tourism market in general. China is a very important part of this, obviously, as the world's largest and highest spending outbound tourism market, as well as the first country and market in the world to face the coronavirus crisis, and one of the few places in the world that's already on the path to recovery. So this gives us a blueprint for looking at what hotels have been doing there and what's worked best, as well as how consumers have been affected by the epidemic and how the market is likely to recover and change. Dragon Trail works with clients on every continent except Antarctica and with a number of industry verticals in tourism. And this includes destinations, attractions, airlines, cruise lines, and of course, a number of hotels. So I don't think you need me to tell you that COVID-19 has been disastrous for the global tourism and hospitality sectors, among many other sectors. And I'm sure many of us are feeling shipwrecked at this time. But I wanted to start with some data, especially from China, to see what the effects on the hotel industry are really like. Things have been pretty terrible for hotels in China. At the peak of the virus in February, only 10% of hotels in the country were even open. And surveys at that time showed that a vast majority of hoteliers were very pessimistic about occupancy and income. I think we still have a long way to go before China has really recovered, but at present, around 90% of hotels are open. So that gives you some idea of how the recovery has gone, just in terms of that. Looking at online travel sales in China, hotels were the most affected sector, according to a February survey by Chinese travel media Travel Daily. And then this was followed closely by outbound travel. You can find more information about that report, a full translation of it, on our website. Of course, hotels are now suffering all around the world still, and we can see that by the end of March, hotel occupancy was down significantly on at least 3 continents. Apart from potentially in some parts of Asia, these numbers will likely have become worse in the meantime. So for example, projections for the end of March and start of April showed that only 5 to 20% showed that there would only be 5 to 20% hotel occupancy throughout Europe. These numbers, of course, are affected not just by the drop-off in tourism, but also because of the cancellation of events and other business travel, not to mention flight cancellations and entry and exit restrictions for countries around the world. So what can you do? Several tourism professionals I talked to have stressed the importance of social media at this time, as digital channels are now the only way to communicate, and audiences stuck at home are actually quite receptive. So I want to look at what hotel brands have been doing on social media in China and what lessons we can learn from that. I imagine that all hotels have already been dealing with cancellations for some time. And obviously many cancellations will be handled through a travel agency or OTA rather than directly between the hotel and consumer. But in any case, information on changes and cancellations was the first crisis-related communications put out by international hotel groups in China on social media channels WeChat and Weibo as the crisis started in China. And these posts got very positive responses, as it showed that the hotel was communicating clearly about their policies during a time with a lot of uncertainty. So if you're in the position to offer free cancellations, then of course that's something you can do and something some of the larger hotel groups are doing. But many hotels, especially smaller groups or independent properties, are instead opting to give free changes or credit and thus not lose that revenue and merely postpone the guest stay. And we'll look a bit more at this later. One of the next things that hotels in China did was reach out to their loyalty club members by extending membership and points validity, and thus helping to keep those members loyal. Although it turned out to be a bit too optimistic, potentially, IHG was already promoting springtime bookings in late January and early February with the incentive of extra points and free cancellation. So that is something to think about when recovery does seem to be on the horizon, to kickstart that through your loyalty club members. Once you've addressed the initial guest concerns about cancellations and changes, you can start to put out some different communications to provide assurances and support, and let people know what you're doing at this time. These are all ways of staying connected to your audience. In China in February, a lot of brands created posts or videos with the message of 中国加油, or Stay Strong China. Crown and Champa Resorts, for example, they got staff throughout their Maldives properties to film a message of support, and then they edited those clips into a lovely short video to share on social media. Now, of course, it's not just one country or market that needs support, but everyone. I spoke to Constance Hotels, and they explained to me that at this point, their strategy is to emphasize empathy over sales. And they've launched a hashtag Constance with you, with supportive and positive messaging during this time to kind of keep that relationship between guests as opposed to pushing sales, which aren't possible at this time. In terms of assurances, the big topic here is hygiene and safety. This is going to be really important for hotels in the rest of 2020 and 2021 at least. So communicating your hygiene precautions early as Shangri-La hotels especially have been doing in China, is good branding. Finally, we'll talk more about services later, but do use social media to let people know, for example, if you're offering services like food delivery during this time. CSR, or corporate social responsibility, is another good communications theme at this time, and one we'll look at in more detail later on in the giving back section of the webinar. So next, you have the opportunity with online channels to not just connect to your current customer base, but to reach new potential guests during this lockdown period when people are staying at home and changing their normal routines. The most popular way to do this in China is through recipes and chefs' cooking classes. 25% of respondents in Dragon Trail's early March consumer sentiment survey said that they had improved their cooking skills during the lockdown period. And it seems like nearly all of the leading international hotel accounts on Chinese social media were posting home cooking content in late February to early March. A couple of those hotel groups had live cooking classes with things like giveaways to entice viewers to join, and then parts of the class would be published later on WeChat in around 10-minute video clips. Other hotels encouraged user-generated content by offering prize giveaways to followers who shared photos or videos of making the recipe at home. Cooking classes are not the only way to connect with a housebound audience. Many hotels also posted fitness videos of exercises that you can do easily at home, led by their personal trainers. I really liked Malia Hotel's yoga class, which you can see in the middle photo here. They filmed it at their Bali property, and at the end of the post, they included a QR code to follow that particular property. So that's really thinking ahead to long-term branding and marketing. There's also the trend online of online parties and DJ sessions. And a few weeks back, the W Hotel in Shanghai live streamed one of those with a couple of different DJs. I think this is a good move for a hotel that wants to maintain an image of being young and cool, even when they can't host real parties. So you can find more information about the examples that I shared here on an article on the Dragon Trail website about lessons that hotel brands can learn from what hotels have been doing in China. So of course, branding and long-term messaging are important, but I know most, if not all, players in the tourism industry are looking at immediate problems of cash flow and funding. So I want to suggest some way of salvaging any revenue and developing any new sources of revenue that you can at this time. The first is one I mentioned earlier, and you're likely to be well aware of already, and this is to avoid financial collapse and maintain short to medium-term liquidity by offering credit or changes to guests rather than cancellations and refunds. This not only helps you to hang on to the money for now, but ensures that the guests will stay with you eventually when they're likely to spend more money on things like food, drinks, and other hotel services. The image here is of a voucher that I received for a hotel booking in Mexico, where I was meant to be earlier this month, but obviously did not go to. I was very happy to get the voucher in lieu of a refund, especially as this voucher is valid for 2 years. So this really gives me a lot of flexibility to rebook. In China, there's been a major push by hotels to promote food delivery during the lockdown period. Of course, this doesn't work so well for beach resorts, for example, or hotels without restaurants, but it is a good strategy for urban properties. The promotional posts in China have included lots of helpful information, such as which delivery services to use. So for example, some hotels only use one specific delivery service, such as the Chinese equivalent of Uber Eats or Deliveroo. Others will use several, and other hotels require that you come pick up the food yourself, although this is much more rare. The posts also included information on all the participating properties and their contact information, as well as recommendations for dishes or restaurants, and importantly, details on the hygiene standards and safety checks so that customers felt safe ordering their food. I imagine that these social media posts may have been boosted with advertising, but in general, they got much higher than average views on WeChat for all of the hotel groups that posted them. So the audiences for these posts promoting food delivery were very large. There has also been a push to generate current and future revenue with vouchers. So when hotels host live cooking classes, which I talked a bit about earlier, at that point you can buy discounted vouchers to the hotel restaurants while the live cooking class is going on, because the live cooking class is hosted through an e-commerce platform. During the live cooking classes, there are also giveaways of vouchers, and we've also seen giveaways of room vouchers in popular online competitions. I think the idea here, beyond just generating interest and user interaction with these kinds of giveaways and discounts, is that if you win a free dinner, you might bring extra guests or order extras like wine. And if you win a one-night stay in a hotel, you might extend that to additional paid nights and or spend money in the hotel. So all of these things will hopefully stimulate recovery later on. The stress on hotel restaurants here also targets what is predicted to be the first recovery market, which is local people dining out. I've only seen this on WeChat from Shangri-La hotels, but I thought it was an interesting idea that they're promoting the professional laundry services. At this time, obviously, their housekeeping staff won't be busy with the normal loads of towels and sheets or guest laundry services. So that means that they have these huge laundry facilities that are really professional that can now be used for consumers who aren't staying at the hotel. I think that this could work especially well in cities where many people either use shared laundry facilities inside their buildings or go outside to laundromats. But actually in big Chinese cities, people generally do have their own washing machines at home. It's just that in this time, perhaps, some consumers are willing to pay a premium for really high standards of cleaning for household items as well as clothes. This last idea for generating revenue is actually not something that I've seen any hotels doing during the crisis, but I did think it was an idea to consider. Unless there are production-related obstacles, it's a time when hotels that offer items for the home can really be pushing these for sale. At this time when people are spending so much more time at home than usual, they may be thinking about ways to make their living spaces nicer. So in this case, maybe they can't go to a nice hotel, but they can buy hotel quality bed linens, towels, robes, scented candles, or even big ticket items like mattresses. So if this is something that your hotel already does and has the capacity to do at this time, it's a good time, I think, to push these kinds of sales. So moving away from ways to make money now, what can hotels do to give back? This is, of course, on one hand altruistic, but on the other hand, it can help the recovery to come quicker, hopefully, and it's very good for brand image. I would like to first share a case study of how multiple players in the travel industry can all come together to help, which is something we're very proud to have had Dragon Trail Interactive developers work on. The City Together app for Wuhan. As the crisis was taking off in Wuhan in January, a young woman named Xiao Yaxing, who runs 3 hotels in Wuhan, she started a WeChat group called the Wuhan Hotel Apartment Volunteer Alliance to help medical staff with accommodation. That group was then joined by Chinese OTA Fliggy and Chinese travel media Travel Daily. They then approached Dragon Trail about creating an app. This app helped medical staff in Wuhan to find free or very cheap hotel accommodation near to their hospitals, so they could avoid commuting and also protect their families. The app was used by more than 170 hotels and 300 medical workers in Wuhan. With the crisis now over there, the app is being shut down, but this is an open source app that we're happy to share with anyone for free, and we can also help with free translation services if anyone would like to create a version of this app for their own community. You can watch demo videos to see exactly how the app works and also find more information about it online. And the link that is on this slide will be included in the PDF of the presentation, which you'll receive by email tomorrow. So, of course, many hotels overseas are already offering free accommodation to medical staff, which is great. Unrelated to the City Together app, hotel groups like Marriott also hosted medical workers in Wuhan. And they publicized this on social media, which gave them very positive exposure at a time when they weren't going to receive any bookings anyway. You can see an example of that on the left from Hilton. You can also see some news stories about famous luxury properties that are hosting medical staff in London and New York on the right. So as well as hosting medical staff, hotels can also be used as either hospitals or quarantine centers. In the Maldives, China, and Mauritius, at least, and I imagine other countries as well, hotels are being used to quarantine international arrivals. In Thailand, they're considering turning some hotels into temporary hospitals, and the same thing is happening in the UK. Of course, every country will have its own strategy, but in China, at least, international arrivals in quarantine centers, they do actually have to pay a moderate fee for their stay. So it's a way for hotels to bring in some revenue at this time too. Hotels can also use their catering capabilities to help medical workers. In Wuhan, hotels delivered meals and other supplies to hospitals and also hosted medical staff to eat meals at the hotel. The example here from Instagram on the right, it's not a hotel, but it's a celebrity chef and restaurant owner in Paris who's currently delivering daily meals to a local hospital. Hotels and larger restaurants especially are in a good position to help in this way because of the size of their kitchens and their organizational capacity to cater for large events, such as meetings or weddings. So I know it seems quite early to talk about recovery, especially in places like Europe or the US, where we are really in the midst of this pandemic. But I think it's important to know as early as possible where the recovery is most likely to come from to make sure that you're ready for it. So one way to get ready for recovery is to use this downtime for self-improvement. And that can mean redeploying staff to do repairs and minor renovations in the hotel, as well as staff training. With travel frozen in China in February, travel agencies really pushed their employees to do more online training. And Dragon Trail's database of Chinese travel agents who take the self-study programs we create for clients on the China Travel Academy platform, it surged from 40,000 travel agents to 52,000 travel agents in around 5 weeks. We're currently working on an online training program in English, which is designed to educate the travel industry abroad about the Chinese outbound tourism market, and that's planned to launch next month. So that said, Dragon Trail specializes in tourism marketing for outbound Chinese travelers, and of course we want you to target them, and we're sure they'll be back in the future. But realistically, outside of China, they're not going to be your first guests. It looks like all over the world, people are going to travel locally before they travel internationally. And they may start really small, like traveling within their own state or region. I would say first, target locals to come to your F&B outlets. Then move on to people from nearby who are going on a local holiday or a weekend away. Then you can start to think about short and long haul outbound travel. Asia is always the biggest outbound destination for Chinese tourists, so short haul markets like Korea, Thailand, and Japan are likely to recover first. Based on our own research and other reports on the Chinese market, it looks like young people, especially those under the age of 30, are likely to travel first. So this is another market to target. Business travel is also likely to recover before long-haul leisure. And at least for the Chinese market, we expect a strong demand for family travel after the crisis is over. You can read more in our own survey and translations of other Chinese consumer reports on our blog. People are going to be really shaken by this crisis and understandably worried about hygiene and safety. It's Chinese consumers' top concern right now, and that's likely to be true for other markets too. And it will also influence where people want to stay and where they want to travel. So it's a good idea to ramp up your hygiene procedures and be really transparent about this. Small touches like providing hand sanitizer or, for example, special boxes or baskets in guest rooms where guests can leave their shoes by the door, these might be the kinds of details that stand out. In China, at least, it's predicted that this crisis will accelerate technological innovations and trends in hotels like contactless check-in, robot room service, and digital concierge services, all cutting down on direct human-to-human interaction. In this industry, I think we'll have to think about what we want this future to look like, as the human element is so important in hospitality. So, for example, this is completely unrelated to the coronavirus, but at the Munich airport, if you go to a help desk, it's not actually a desk with a person standing there, but it's a screen. And through that screen, it connects you to a staff member via a video call. So, although there isn't physical human-to-human interaction there, you still get to interact with a human and see their face and have that kind of human contact as opposed to just talking to a robot or a chatbot. So there may be some middle ground there to cut down on physical proximity, but still have a human element to service. So just wrapping up here, I want to say that there are a lot of great resources out there with practical tips and many real examples. And I wanted to share a small reading list with you of articles that I found very helpful in understanding this and preparing for the webinar, as well as some additional information from Dragon Trail. So these links will all be included in the PDF of these slides, which you will receive tomorrow. For much more information on the Chinese outbound tourism market, effects of COVID-19 on Chinese consumers, Chinese social media for travel brands, and more, please visit our website at dragontrail.com. You can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter and follow us on social media on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also request a free copy of the 2019 edition of China, the Future of Travel at chinafutureoftravel.com. Thank you very much to everyone for joining today. I'm now ready to open up for Q&A. I see that people have asked some questions already, so I'll just take a minute to have a look at those and then answer. If you have colleagues who you think might like to join but weren't able to join the session now, we are running a second session of the webinar at 5 p.m. UK time, and registration is still open for that through our website. While I look at the questions, I'm also going to launch a quick poll now, and if you could take a minute to fill that out, it would be quite helpful for us to get your feedback and planning for the future.